Alright, everyone, welcome back to another episode. This is gonna be a more relaxed podcast style episode just to tie you guys over while I'm working on the next longer form, more well researched and written out type of video. It's taken me a while because I gotta play through the whole thing again. I don't want to spoil what it is, but it's taken me a little bit. So I wanted to share some thoughts on this recent show that I just finished called Mushoku Tensei. If you follow me on Twitter, you know that this is probably one of my top favorite shows this season. It's been a while since I've been this engrossed in an anime series, since I don't have that much free time anymore, and this is gonna be more casual, so you're gonna have to excuse me for a lot of ums and ahs. I'm not at the level of being free flow chat just yet. I still gotta have like ums and stuff. I do have notes on the side that I want to have like a sort of guideline on what I want to talk about, but generally this is gonna be more relaxing. I'm not gonna have too much editing in terms of like the video in the background. This is something you can put on the background, and let's just have a chat about this show. And if you like this sort of style, make sure to leave a like, maybe subscribe. Okay, share your thoughts in the comments, because this is actually a kind of a controversial show. If you go onto Mao right now, it's sitting at an 8.4, 8.5 right now, which is pretty high. But then you go on to look at the top reviews. There are like 1s and 3s and 4s, and a lot of the issues come from a very controversial thing that kind of happened in the show, which we're gonna cover kind of briefly. I do want to talk about that aspect of the show, but overall, let's just start at the beginning. The animation wise, this show, we all know the studio was made just for this show. Studio Bind is made just for Mushoku Tensei, so it must mean it's got some pretty talented people coming on, just all right, we're gonna a lot of passionate people rather coming on to the show and working on it. And you can see this in a lot of these sort of sword fights, or the sword animations when these characters are practicing sword play. And you can see that every sort of frame is very animated, and you see a lot of the early discussions about the show on Twitter or Reddit is people sharing clips from these animation clips, and it's looking pretty clean. And can we just talk about how the OP, there isn't really an OP for this series. There is an ED, but the OP is just this kind of ambient, soulful kind of tune, and it's just sets the tone so beautifully. It's not, it's just shots of the environment, or in later episodes just characters traveling the country, and it just really intensifies the situation. And here's a part about OPs of animes that a lot of people have issues with, is it just kind of spoils the entire show, right? You see characters you never met, and you kind of get hints of what the character relationship's gonna be. If the characters are standing next to each other, you can kind of assume, oh, they're on the same side, or they're in the same kind of faction. But in the show, there isn't really that, and you just kind of gotta experience the story as it's being told. So we're gonna go into a little bit of the plot right now, and the fact that we get to see his whole life. This is an isekai show, but the fact that we see his whole life from starting as a fucking baby, right? And it's not just start from baby and then boom, in the same episode he's a teenager or some bullshit like that. You get to see him as a fucking kid just messing around and trying to learn magic and whatnot. Is so interesting. It's so different from all the other isekai shows that's been airing recently, in comparison to the slime isekai or Re:Zero. Not really Re:Zero, because that's not really a reincarnation, right? But if we compare it to slime isekai, they kind of just go to sort of skip over a bit of the beginning parts. From this show, I really enjoy how they keep a lot of that development in. And it's kind of weird at the beginning where he's wow, I'm still a baby, so I'm not turned on by sucking on my mom's tit. I'm yeah, dude, you don't have to mention that, man. We also, in the first episode, we get introduced to Roxy, which is really fantastic character. She doesn't really do that much, but she is her impact on our main character Rudy is so strong that even though every episode onwards, he keeps on referring to what Roxy has taught her, how she has to live up to her expectations. And really in this first episode, it really establishes that like teacher-student relationship that I really enjoy. So in the second episode is where, you know, Rudius is learning a lot more about magic, a lot more from Roxy. But the most important part is we get a bit of flashback to Rudius's first human life in the modern Japan or whatever, and we get a sense of like our character mentally is like a 35-year-old dude, and he is like to put it lightly is a fucking disgusting human being, a degenerate, and we aren't really supposed to how do you call it, agree with most of his actions or thoughts. The fact that he's constantly look up Roxy's underwear or some shit like that, it's not something that we as the audience should be agreeing with. It's just to portray like how much of a fucking degenerate this guy is. So, and we get to see a bit of the reason, right? Because he was bullied at school. That's how he was, you know, I think there was one shot of him like just strung up on the school gate like naked. Like that's pretty messed up stuff. We see all that, and you see that that's the reason why his human self was like locked up in his house, because he just does not want to go outside. So here that same mentality gets, you know, brought up into Rudius's life in this new world. And when Roxy's like, hey, let's head outside, let's go for a walk outside so you can practice your magic, he's like, whoa, in the 5 years of being alive in this world, I've never stepped outside of my house, just like in the past life. And when he finally does, when Roxy helps him walk outside, right, it's like a completely new experience. And the most important part of that episode is that he realizes that even though Roxy's been, you know, in his village, his town for what, like maybe a year or two, she has completely like been a part of this village, saying hi to his like the neighbors or the other villagers. And he just finally realizes like the outside world is not that scary, and in this new world he really is given that chance to start over, to not have the same fear as his old self. And that was one of the new sort of the most important thing that Roxy has told him, is that, you know, it's okay to open yourself up, to say hi, to be friendly with other people, and it's perfectly normal. So onto the third episode is when we're introduced to Sylphy. I don't know how the fuck you say it in English, but in the Japanese show they call it Sylphy, but it's just a very predictable part where, you know, he saves this green-haired person on the road, but it turns out he thinks it's a boy, but then it turns out to be a girl. And this is kind of like the first episode where like a little bit of the, how do you explain it, a little bit of sus aspect of the show comes in. The reaction from the episode was like, oh, okay, that's a little bit odd, but okay. But the most interesting part about this is Sylphy herself is kind of like a red herring right now, because she's only been active for about an episode and a half maybe. The whole point of this episode is just him like learning to befriend a person, but in this case it turns out to be a girl as well, and he's like, okay, so this is gonna be a childhood friend, I'm gonna like really cherish her and blah blah blah. But the most important part for this episode is like we notice that how she has his friend Sylphy has like an aptitude for magic as well, and I think it suggests that it might be even greater than Rudius, because, you know, as we've seen in the first two episodes, it took Rudius a few years of himself just figuring this stuff out by himself, having Roxy teach him all this magic stuff as well. All this, it took Sylphy maybe like 6 months to figure out, and, you know, Rudius himself is kind of like, damn, bro, did you just really figure this out by yourself? And, you know, even that like incantation, like if you doing magic without incantation, like he just tells Sylphy like, yeah, you can actually do it without it, and she just does it. And he's like, damn, bro, okay. Moving on, in episode 4 there's a bit more characterization of Rudius's family, and I kind of want to get into that a bit more, because this episode is kind of focusing a little bit more about his family. We all know that Rudy's dad Paul is a bit of a larrikin, if you were to use Australian slang, but he's a bit more, like a womanizer, I think they call it in the anime. Paul himself is a swordsman, as we find out before in the later episode. He's in a sort of adventurous party or whatever, and he's a swordsman, and he's also serves as like the village guard, and that's how kind of his main living for this part of the anime. Zenith, his wife, actually, when I first watched this, does anyone else feel like Zenith kind of looks like Mordred? Like if Mordred from the Fate series was more, how do I put it nicely, more developed and has that same kind of like outfit, she kind of looks like Mordred. But anyway, I believe Zenith was the healer in the party, so that's how that kind of family is going. And they also have a maid, Lilia, who's the maid, takes care of the family and all that. In episode 4, one of the most like kind of bruh moment was at the first scene is, hey, Zenith is pregnant again, but then Lilith's like, actually I'm pregnant as well, and this like whole little affair debacle is being carried out in the first 10 minutes of the episode. What happens is Rudius is just kind of uses his charm, or his like smarts, is basically keeps the family together, really. And that was to me a really hard episode to watch, just because it's so uncomfortable, right? You don't really see isekai shows deal with your isekai parents having an affair. You're like, how do you deal with that? Why would you even tackle that issue, right? Because we usually just skip to our main dude. How about we skip to our main dude dealing with his women issues? Why are we dealing with Paul, right? But it's because of that. It makes the show stand out from all the other isekai shows that's been coming out for the past couple of years. Also in this episode, Rudius is wanting to go to this magic college and wants to, get the money for the tuition. He initially asked Paul for money, and he's like, nah, I don't have that much money, so you're gonna have to, give up on that. So then Rudius is like, okay, how about I find a job, right? Let me get a job. And so basically what happens, and this is when the internet blew up, right? Because in episode 4, if you don't remember, we were introduced finally to Ghislaine, however you pronounce it. It's and you've one look at this woman, right? This is what peak performance look like, okay? This is what peak performance of an anime woman looks like. She is buff as hell. She is just absolute a monster, right? Later on, we see her what do you call it? Her fighting, and my God, there is just, you can so see clearly like the difference in power level between like her, who is, I think, they introduce like different power levels of like swordsmanship, and she is so high up that that for Rudy is just like such a big difference, right? The show doesn't say like, oh, Ghislaine is just like the perfect, she's the smartest, she's the strongest, right? There are parts where, she has to still things that she lacks. Later on, when Rudius is, tutoring Eris about like magic and stuff, he is also teaching Ghislaine about magic. Things like math, he is teaching Ghislaine about that as well. And she's still trying to figure out how this stuff works, because she just never had the chance to learn about it. Because I think part of her character is that she just knows how to fight, and she's like great at that. But on the other aspect of it, such as like real world economy knowledge on magic, she doesn't know how to do it. So speaking a little bit more about Eris and the tutor thing is probably like the next arc of the show from episode 5 onwards, which is when Rudius is becoming this tutor for Eris, which I guess is kind of his cousin, because they're from the same Grey Rat family tree. We get a little bit more explanation on the whole Grey Rat family line, is that there's different houses, there's different factions from the Grey Rats. They're from slightly different trees, but they're all from they have the same surname. So she's kind of his cousin, but she's like, I think 2 years older than him. Eris, when you first see them, and Rudius himself says it, like, this is just clearly a tsundere character type. And she does seem like that at first, and appears like that. And for the first couple of episodes, as she is warming up to Rudius, she just like, absolutely hates him, hates that he is giving her instructions on what to do, and that he is better than her at magic. So in this episode, Rudius is coming up with this scheme, like, what if I show her how useful magic is? Then she'll listen to me, and comes up with this scheme to, like, kidnap her and, escape this kidnapping using magic, right? And this is one of, like, the first bruh moments of the show, is when they got kidnapped, yes, but it wasn't actually like a play, a fake kidnapping. It was actually real. So then when Rudius is like in this kidnapped room with Eris, and this like thief or like this fucking lowlife comes into the room and just beats up Eris. Rudy's just like, whoa, that's pretty good acting, but I think you're going a little too hard. We're just, getting the point across. What the fuck are you doing? When the camera pans around to see Eris just absolutely, fucking destroyed, right? Laying in a pulp of blood on the ground, like bleeding out. That's like a next level of like brutality that we haven't seen yet in the show, right? And, thankfully, Rudius has the healing spell that kind of patches her up. But at that moment, when you see her lying in her own blood and her teeth is like on the blood pile, you're like, holy shit, this show is not pulling punches. So later on, they finally escape and manages to return to the town where the house is at. They actually ran into the kidnappers again, and this is when we first see like Ghislaine's full power. And when Rudius realized, like, okay, actually I might have messed up, I'm not as strong as I thought I would be. I am, there's this, they learned how the robbers actually threw a sword at them, and he's not prepared to deflect that. You can see like how strong Ghislaine is, and she just deflects the sword and ends like the whole thing in like in like a millisecond, right? And you just see like the heads roll on the ground, and Rudius himself sees that brutality and sees that like headless body rolling on the floor, and just like is at all at that. In comparison, like Eris didn't really care about it. He's just like, okay, people who were kidnapping us has been killed, so okay, I'm safe now, right? But Rudius himself has to take that moment in, like, whoa, this is for real. This is a serious world, and people can die and have consequences, right? So continuing on, we have the next episode, and this is where in episode 6 we got this like little bit of where the controversy starts with, where we have this kind of Eris, kind of touchy bits happening in this episode. And this is when a lot of the controversy starts with this show. To kind of address that, the whole point, if you're Rudius is a character where I think you miss the point if you kind of idolize him, if you really think like everything he does is the right thing. We've seen in so many instances, whether through flashbacks or his internal monologue, that Rudius's mental self is a dirty, degenerate, is a absolute disgusting human being, right? And so his action to choose to basically touch Eris without consent, we're supposed to see that as a disgusting act. We're supposed to view that with disgust. We're not supposed to see like, hell, yeah, go ahead, that's it. That's the right thing to do, So as we see that, it's supposed to reinforce the idea that although Rudius has been in this world for, at this point, 7 to 8 years now, his mental self, who's 35 years old, or by this point like 40 something now, is still like the main influence on his behavior. And although we see a little bit of development in his character as well, it's not that fast. It doesn't develop that quickly. So he still has that urge to like act out. He still has the urge to act up. And thankfully, he doesn't just get away with it scot-free. Eris does, beat him up or like, catch him in the act. He just absolutely destroys him, which in all fairness is well deserved. So in my opinion, I don't mind that the show showed it this way. I'm pretty sure this was also depicted in the light novel as well, or I'm not too sure in the manga, but this definitely happens in the light novel. So yeah, it is what it is. So I don't think the show is not condoning his actions in any way. The fact that the audience is definitely supposed to see that as a disgusting act is the right sort of takeaway for this. So in this episode, basically is more of a slice of life where he's trying to teach Eris, and getting her to be more receptive about his teachings. And over time, he kind of gets her to be more open to learning about magic, or in his case, also math as well. In the next episode, we have Eris's 10th birthday, and he has to kind of teach her to like dance and stuff, which is kind of also part of the slice of life action. These kind of episodes are kind of slow. It's very much just world building. But most importantly, in this episode, we see that Rudius is learning language. He's learning Beast God language, which is a totally different language group. And this comes in useful very much so, like in the next few episodes. And in this episode, Eris is trying to dance, but he couldn't. And, predictably at the end, Rudius has got to be the one to come in and save her in this really awkward situation. And they solve it by like saying like, no, Eris, just close your eyes and pretend you're doing sword dances. And you're like, okay, man, I'm sure. Yeah, sure. I guess that works. And then in the next episode, it's 2 years later now, and Rudius is 10 years old as well. So there's a birthday party for him. But then there's another sus moment where Rudius is like, you know what? Let's just marry Eris. And I'm not sure how this works in fantasy world, right? Which we can totally give them the benefit of the doubt that this is a thing that happens probably a lot, right? You can marry your cousin and whatever. It's fine. Let's say it's fine. But the fact that he's 10 and Eris is like what 12 at this point, they're like, you know what? Let's marry each other. Is kind of like a confusing moment, right? You're not too sure how to deal with it. But then later on, like Philip, like the Eris's dad, was like, we can totally have this like internal coup in the Grey Rat family tree, house, right? And he says, no, I don't want to do it. But then Philip is like, okay, but what if I give you my daughter and you can have this relationship with her right now? And Reese is like, bruh, no, man. But then later on, Eris is still in his bedroom still, right? So then this whole moment where Rudius is like, okay, let's give this a go. What if I do act out? Eris says it's okay, so I'm gonna do it, right? But then Eris is like, no, this is wrong. So then they say, no, let's think about this when we're both adults. Maybe then we can actually figure things out. And so, Rudy says, okay, all right, you're right. Let's give it some time. This whole exchange, I remember when this episode came out, a few friends who were also watching the show was like, bruh, this is kind of this is a sus moment. I'm not sure this show is what is the show going, man? I'm already minimized the window that I'm watching this anime. I'm turning down the sound, bro. This is kind of weird, dude. And yeah, I would still echo my thoughts from before. Like it's so weird. It's so weird that it's tackling this show because if you think about this like in a real life kind of way, if you think about this with real life lenses, right? Mentally, he's a 40-something-year-old dude with a 12-year-old girl, and this is fucked up. But also you gotta think about it like that we're not supposed to agree with his action. We're supposed to see this as a disgusting act. Again, I gotta like reiterate myself, gotta repeat myself, like this is not it, Chief. this is not it. If you are agreeing with his actions, if you really think like, yes, Rudius, you are doing the right thing, you go get that girl, that's not it, Chief. That's not it. We're supposed to recoil. That's how I was sitting, watching this episode. I was leaning back, full recoil, this is kind of ox, okay? This episode was a turning point, really, because he was given this staff, and he's about to use this to cast a spell just to top off his birthday, right? It's a lit birthday party. He's like, all right, let me show you guys my best trick. So he walks out to this like countryside with Eris and Ghislaine, and he's about to pull it off. But as before he could do it, this like mana, huge cloud of mana forms in the sky, right? And this like mana phenomenon occurs that pulls all of them out, and you just see this like ray of light just engulfs them, and we find out next episode they got transported to like a completely different continent or like part of the world. This is the end of that like Eris arc, like chilling tutoring Eris. That arc has finished, and we get to like the next section, the next 3 episodes. But before that, we get a few hints of a few more players in this greater world. We have seen hints of the hero Pergius, which was mentioned, through bedtime stories to Rudius. But this time we actually see him sending out his like subordinate to investigate this mana phenomenon. We have like this guy who's talking to dragons and stuff beforehand, trying to like figure out what's going on. There's also this like lolly character. I'm not sure what her name was. I'll find out in a bit. There's this lolly character who's like, okay, let's do something, but we just don't know what the fuck her deal was. But there's a lot of different players that this episode is hinting to that we don't really see much in the past episodes. But in this episode 9, which we're gonna see, is that Rudius Eris has been transported to a different section and meets this guy whose name is Ruijerd, and he's a speared race, and we've had hints, we've been told beforehand that like people with green hair and like a third eye on their forehead are like basically demons, right? They kill without any thought, they're merciless, they're all this and that, and this is like for the first time we've seen them. And at first like Rudius is apprehensive, like, whoa, that's the guy, like my parents have been telling me about this guy, like we gotta be careful about this. But still, like the fact that he's been rescued, right? They're sitting beside this like campfire, and they've been rescued means that maybe he's got good intentions. So he speaks to him in beast god language, and finds out like, okay, he's actually not that bad of a guy, and they kind of like have this rapport now. Later on, like Eris wakes up and she has that like big reaction that like people normally have when they see a speared race, is that like you're gonna die. But in this case, it's totally not the case. They become like pretty good friends, and later on they travel to this nearby town, and it turns out this is where Roxy is from. This is Roxy's hometown, and when they get to like the elder and they have a chat about what to do next, Ruijerd just like straight up makes the pledge or the promise, like, I will get these kids back home. This is my job now. This is what I will do. No matter what it takes, I'm gonna take them back home. And so during this time, we get a little bit more backstory about the Spear tribe's like misconception, and it's a pretty complicated explanation, but really it's just some beef to do with the demon god. Ruijerd, his goal is to clear the name, right? That we're not just like mindless murderers. We actually are doing what we think is right. We're doing things that we believe is just. Rudius himself is like, okay, then in that case, you can take us to the town, and we as human children, we can sort of work to that and help your reputation. And so they kind of have this sort of deal worked out. Not really a deal, but Rudius is offering him something in exchange as well for his help. It's like, as much as we can do, we will try to clear your name in these towns and stuff. So in episode 10, they finally arrive in this new city, and in this whole city, like, because they just come in, like they're trying to get to this adventurers guild, but because they're just new adventurers, they start off like really low. And in this episode, it's very unique in this episode is that because Rudius has learned the beast god language, most of this episode is carried out in beast god language, and it's really strange because, you know, a lot of animes, sometimes they like, oh, we have this different language, right? Recently I've been watching what do you call it, the Demon Lord is a part-timer, and they have their own sort of language as well. But a lot of the other animes, if there is a, you know, another fictional language, they'll just kind of be speaking gibberish. But in this episode, in this series, like the other languages, they kind of sound legit. So I kind of appreciate. And so in this episode, we also get a little bit about like kind of Eris's development throughout this whole trip. As we've seen at the beginning, Eris is totally like tsundere type, and she just absolutely hates, you know, Rudius's guts. But at this point, she fully believes in Rudius, in that he kind of like is capable of taking everyone home safely. So when he when they got into this town, and Rudius buys Eris like this little cape thing, which looks really cute, and it kind of reminds me of that like cape that in Xenoblade 2, where Pyra wear, it's like this cat ear cloak. He buys Eris this, and later on, when they were just having a chat with like this adventure, like this other party, when they're signing up to this, when they go into the inn rather, there's this other adventure party, and there's also like kids. They were just talking to Eris and whatnot. Eris actually, like, this whole exchange made Eris kind of like tear like the cloak, and because of that, she got so angry that she just like full on beat up this kid. And she says, as she's doing this, like, how could you, you know, damage this thing that Rudius brought me? And it just shows like how different, like how different their relationship is at this point. Eventually they do, you know, accept this request at the Adventurers Guild, and it's to find some kidnapped animals, right? So then they finally track it to the hideout, and when they find the three dudes who are doing this, who are kidnapping these pets, they kind of like restrain them and saying, guys, why are you doing this? One of the kidnappers who are doing this, like, you know, kicked Rudius, just like, get the fuck away from me, kid. As he did so, Rudius is like, whoa, okay, dude, why would you kick me? And as he's, you know, looking up, you can see like just immediately Ruijerd just fucking decapitates this dude, right? His bug head just rolls onto the ground, and Rudius is like, wait, what? And Ruijerd's like, you know, that's what I do. You hurt a child, you deserve to die. Rudius is like, whoa, this is like the bruh moment of the episode, if I were to put it that way. You know, this is the bruh moment of the episode, where Rudius is like, wait, for real? That's the kind of like moral compass that Ruijerd is on, that if you injured a child, or if your actions lead to a child getting hurt, I will take it upon myself to kill you immediately. And so Rudius tells Ruijerd, like, just stop, don't do this. And so they kind of force the two kidnappers to like, okay, we're gonna exchange jobs, right? Because these guys are like slightly higher ranked than Rudius's party. So then they just like, all right, if you get a task, we're gonna take your task and you're gonna take ours, so we can take on harder tasks and make more money. And that's kind of like how this episode ends. And in this episode, like, the most important part to take away is just like how brutal Ruijerd is, actually. Because before, it was all fun and games. You just see him as this kind of like stubborn, hard, right? He's strong, right? But he's not that hard. We can see him as a kind of adorable guy. And when, you know, in the previous scene, when Rudius is comforting Eris in their inn, saying, you know, it's gonna be alright, we're gonna work this out, you know, you see Ruijerd kind of like listening in and, you know, being happy that these two kids, you know, are working these things out and having that, you know, bravery to overcome this issue. All of a sudden, you see him immediately do this crazy act. It really grounds this world that anything could happen. People can die just like that. And by extension, in episode 11, similar thing happened, is when they go to this forest to kill this snake monster. Rudius is still trying to do his part of the goal, is trying to, you know, build up Ruijerd's kind of reputation, trying to help him, you know, develop his reputation. You know, when they went to the forest, there's other parties there who are also going after the snake. snake demon, snake monster. So when they finally get to there and they see another party going in there, Rudius is like, wait, let's not help immediately. Let's wait when it's really desperate, and then we'll come in, and that's gonna do the most for our reputation. And as he's saying this, one of the adventure, which is one of the kids from the adventurers party, one of the kids, they got like the body just like sliced in half and swung into a tree and just falls down onto the ground in like this bloody pulp. And as he Rudius is still trying to like comprehend what happened, Ruijerd just immediately jumps in, Eris jumps in and just takes care of the snake monster, and they kind of just takes care of it. At the end of the battle, Ruijerd immediately jumps to Rudius and pins him up against this tree and says, why the fuck did you do this? Because of your hesitation, because of your schemes, right? You led to one of these kids dying. And Rudius is still trying to like comprehend this, like you're right, I shouldn't have waited. But then one of the party members from the kid that died says, actually it's our fault too as well, because we weren't ready. We should have taken an easier job. We should have just left when we see him, when it's too hard to handle and all that. And they kind of internalize it this way. So when they return to the town, they have this like, there's this other adventurer who's kind of being a bitch, right? This like horse dude who's got like, who's pretty buff, but he's got like a horse head. And he's like, hang on a second, guys, I figured out what you guys are doing. You guys are trading jobs, so I'm gonna be a snitch about it. I'm gonna tell them so you can't get jobs anywhere in your trip. And so this is a terrible situation to be in. And Rudius is like, how do I get out of this? How do I deal with this? Maybe I should just should I just kill him? And he has this resolve, and he looks at Eris and holds her hand, and he thinks to himself like, my goal is to get her back home, and to do that, to that end, I'm willing to just like destroy this whole town. I'm ready to like, I'm capable of nuking this whole town. And you can see him like start channeling mana into his staff and being ready to cast his spell. But then Ruijerd kind of catches onto that and sees that Rudius is willing to go so far to defend their trip, to make sure to get to home, that he in a way kind of sacrifices himself, sacrifices reputation, right? As he kind of takes off his disguise and shows himself to be a spirit race, and then threatens this horse guy and says to him, all right, you're not gonna do that. You're not gonna tell on us, because if you do, I'm gonna find you and I'm gonna take care of you. And after saying that, he hot tails out of this town and leaves. And that's kind of Rudius and Eris's cue to like, all right, let's get the fuck out of here and go to the next town and get the fuck out of here. That's kind of the end of this arc for Rudius's party. That's kind of also where season 1 ends. We know season 2 is coming, but that's kind of is the end of season 1, is where Rudius, Eris, and Ruijerd are leaving this town, heading to this new town that's a lot bigger than the town they were in before. We're gonna have to see how they're gonna get home. So to kind of end this kind of video off, I do have a few more predictions or how I see the future of the series is gonna go for season 2. We know that Paul actually has, in that final episode, he mentioned that he's gonna have his own journey into finding the rest of his family. We know that Zenith, Aisha, Lilia actually has disappeared as well, and so he's also going on his own journey to find the rest of his family. And we learned that he's lost all of his fortune. I think he either lost it in that mana phenomenon or like spent them all in the search of his family. And so that's gonna be probably something we're gonna witness as well. But we also see that Roxy has sort of like given up, left her job as a tutor for that prince to go on this trip to find Rudius and Eris and all that. And she kind of meets up with this dwarf and this female cleric that is part of Paul's party from the past. And we find out later on that they are also heading into the same city that Rudius and Eris and Ruijerd are heading to. So we can kind of expect that kind of like reunion happening in season 2, which I'm really hyped about, and see, hopefully Roxy and Rudius is gonna have some kind of like reunion and kind of see each other, how far they have gone in terms of their skills or their magic. We also want to see a few more of the characters that were hinted before, the other players in the story, the guy who talks to the dragon, the lolly character, and hero Pergus, what he's doing, and also what the hell that mana phenomenon was in the first place. We never really find out what that one was about. What did that light do? Because was that just a localized phenomenon where it just, you know, teleported everyone within the range, or did that happen to like, you know, the whole city or like this whole continent? What was that whole thing about? We still don't know, and hopefully we're gonna find out in season 2. So that's my thoughts on season 1 of Mushoku Tensei. I really enjoyed this show, and I hope some of you guys are as invested in the show as I am. I want to get like a little discussion going in the comments as well. What do you see this show going? What do you think about this kind of more sus aspect of the show? Do you kind of agree with what I thought, or are you kind of like on the fence about it? What are your thoughts on some characters? How much do you want to fondle Ghislaine's abs? Okay, that's another aspect I didn't talk about, but we can definitely go on a whole another hour of discussion just on how based Ghislaine is. Okay, she is just amazing. I love the fact that she's in the show. Who is this woman on my timeline right now? And then I watched that episode, I'm like, all right boys, let's go. What the fuck am I talking about? Yeah, so this is a new type of content I want to try and experiment on this channel. In addition to my more kind of written out kind of content, I do want to have more thought related to anime or like video games, that kind of thing. So let me know if you want to see more. Hit the like button, subscribe, comment, and all that, and follow me on Twitter. And I'll talk to you later.